Oh, we're all gonna die.
The mighty world of Marvel is far greater than the planet Earth, or even the entirety of the universe it resides in. There is a limitless expanse of realities known as the multiverse, itself populated with every type of world imaginable. Today at CBR, we're diving into and exploring the infinite expanse that is the Marvel Multiverse. The Marvel Multiverse is an endless collection of universes that all reside alongside one another. What can only be conceived as dream and impossibility in one realm of existence is tangible reality in another. Nothing is impossible within the multiverse, and those that manage to explore it find themselves traveling betwixt worlds of the utmost wonder and perplexity. In the comics, the multiverse exists as the spheres of reality outside that of Earth 616, or the core Marvel timeline. Simply put, Earth 616 is the definitive Marvel universe, with every other parallel universe existing as an alternate reality. Prime examples of alternate Earths include Earth 1991, where the X-Men aren't mutants, but magical knights set within a medieval world. Earth 9602 is a world where the heroes of the Marvel and DC universes merged into what is known as the Amalgam Universe. And Earth 2149 is the world that spawned the horrific Marvel zombies. In the MCU, the multiverse exists in largely the same ways as it does within the comics. An expanse of infinite alternate possibilities, the multiverse contains what-ifs that alter core details of the mainstream MCU Earth. Best explored in Disney Plus's What If series, the cinematic multiverse features worlds where Ant-Man became a supervillain, Thor never experienced emotional maturity, and Doctor Strange became consumed with dark magic. In the Marvels, Photon manages to travel between major universes and ends up in a reality where the X-Men exist. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, as its title suggests, features the Sorcerer Supreme as he travels through a series of strange and wondrous alternate worlds. Deadpool and Wolverine was an excellent portrayal of the multiverse, as it depicted several alternate versions of Wolverine, including his Patch and Age of Apocalypse personas. Regardless of whether it is depicted in the comics or the films, the Marvel Multiverse is a place of dream-made reality. As Avengers Secret Wars marches ever closer, it'll be truly exciting to see how much of the multiverse is brought together for one massive cinematic crossover event. Which world within the Marvel Multiverse is your favorite? Hello and welcome to CBR. With 2 more films left in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 5, we're only halfway through the Multiverse Saga. Beginning with Phase 4's Black Widow in 2021, the post-Endgame Marvel movies have struggled to reach the same heights as the earlier phases. Let's take a closer look at where the Multiverse Saga has struggled and the reasons why. First and foremost, the most important thing to note about the Marvel Cinematic Universe's downfall is that it took a long time for it to reach the heights of the duology Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Before the official Marvel Cinematic Universe began, Marvel did not develop their own in-house productions. Licensing their properties to other studios like 20th Century Fox and Universal, Marvel's characters appeared intermittently on-screen in films like the X-Men series and Fantastic Four, the latter of which featured a pre-Captain America Chris Evans. It took a long time of trial and error, including an unreleased Fantastic Four film from 1994, for Marvel to begin developing its own ideas of creative control and cross-film cohesion. Beginning in 2008 with Iron Man starring Robert Downey Jr. in the title role, Marvel Studios set forth on a path that would lead to the multi-billion-dollar franchise we have today. While it might seem like the Marvel Cinematic Universe was born on May 2nd of that year, it was in fact several years of hard work that led to Marvel Studios developing its own films and interconnected franchise. Iron Man may be the first film of the official Marvel Cinematic Universe, but since its release, it hasn't been entirely smooth sailing. The first misfire also came out in 2008, The Incredible Hulk, starring Edward Norton as Bruce Banner. While there's nothing overtly terrible about the film, it has largely been ignored within the MCU. Subsequent Hulk appearances were handled by Mark Ruffalo, and the whole Hulk on the Run aspect of the film, especially General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross's pursuit of Hulk and developing a super soldier serum, have never been broached again. Still, there's a possibility that Captain America: Brave New World will reignite the old vendettas, with Thunderbolt Ross becoming the President of the United States. Other MCU titles have also come and gone with little impact on the franchise as a whole. Thor's first film, from 2011, appearing a whole 3 years after Iron Man first appeared, bears little resemblance in tone to any of the Asgardians' subsequent appearances. In short, it took a long time for the MCU to hit its stride. The impact of Avengers Endgame was only possible through trial and error, and years leading up to the notion of an interconnected universe. By the time Infinity War and Endgame came out, the groundwork was laid, and audiences were interested in a roster that was more or less guaranteed to have a certain amount of draw. If there's any boon to the pre-Multiverse Saga era, it's the fact that all of its main heroes are Marvel's most popular characters. The Multiverse Saga never really had a chance to start fresh. In fact, that was never the point. The problem is that anything in the post-Endgame MCU is going to be compared to the series' highest high, which was the culmination, at that point, of 11 years' worth of material receiving a grand finale. Conversely, the Multiverse Saga is essentially a soft reboot, without the benefit of having the easily recognizable characters that even non-Marvel fans know about. For fans who instantly decried the film's so-called dip in quality after Endgame, they are forgetting just how many duds marked the path to get there. Naturally, starting fresh means having to go through certain processes again, developing an overall tone for phases 4 through 6, while differentiating itself from the Infinity Saga. Where Marvel made crucial missteps was in its overall conception for the multiverse, which allows for far too many possibilities in a universe that has already established notions like the quantum realm and had characters explore the outer expanses of the known universe and even gone to Asgard. With sci-fi, magic, and more now a part of the MCU, there are just too many elements that can be called upon for storytelling that they don't all sit together in an entirely believable way. Then, with the addition of infinite variations, there's just far too much possibility and too many options for exploration. In shows like Loki and movies like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the possibility of calling upon other realities or moving from one to another presents a deflating sense that no one individual is unique, but rather a piece that can be replaced at will, undercutting the importance of character sacrifices. There's also a pervading sense that, despite new realms to access, Marvel continues to approach its new thematic material in the same way as previous phases, following a similar formula. Heroes are introduced. They struggle to find their own identities based on background factors, and then they have to learn how to operate as members of a team. Along with each spate of new superheroes, a villain has to be introduced as well, who always seeks either dominance or destruction, sometimes both, and has their own theory about why they are the most superior being or fully justified in their actions. At some point, it doesn't matter how many head-spinning concepts are introduced, the repetition can make the experience seem too familiar for fans to fully get on board with. With Marvel's forays into television and each series having tie-in lore with what's happening on the big screen, there has been just too much to keep track of. Watching superhero movies should never feel like a chore, and Marvel overstepped its bounds by having too much material in the past few years. A point when several series and several movies could come out in a matter of months, drawing attention to the emphasis on quantity over quality. One good film out of, say, 3 doesn't matter when the other 2 are wholly necessary to understand what will happen in the next good film. In 2025, Captain America: Brave New World and Thunderbolts come to theaters, both of which could mark a real turning point for Marvel. The most memorable MCU films were those like Captain America: Civil War, in which the emphasis was on interpersonal dynamics, characters' beliefs of heroism, and a bad guy whose sole intention was to pit the hero's flaws against each other. The most important thing for Marvel to remember is that people care about the characters and how they navigate their positions of power and duty. The multiverse never began on even ground with the earlier MCU saga, but there is still time to course-correct the franchise before fans receive the highly anticipated return of Robert Downey Jr. and the Russo brothers. Naysayers might be skeptical about the return of RDJ and the Russo brothers, which, in a sense, signals an attempt to call in the big guns to revive fan interest. With Doctor Doom's surprise turn as the Saga's villain, here's a villain who can want something greater than just control or destruction: unity. There is no greater opportunity for Marvel to wrangle its multiverse problem by having a supervillain who wants to organize everything that has led up until now into a cohesive whole. This new universe would contain no more variations, only threads existing separate from another. In a unified universe, consequences are more severe and more accurate to the real world. Doctor Doom might just save the MCU. Let us know what you think of the Multiverse saga so far. Do you have hopes for how it will all turn out?
Hey, and welcome to CBR. Today, we're listing the best reasons for the MCU to wrap up the multiverse concept soon and introduce a new direction for the franchise.
You changed my spell. You don't do that. I told you, and that is why.
Fans are begging for more street-level Marvel. When you have Spider-Man going to space, for example, there are pros and cons. It was definitely fun seeing Peter Parker use the Iron Spider suit made by Tony Stark, but at the same time, street-level heroes like him shouldn't be kept on cosmic-level plots for too long. The Spider-Man trilogy ended with Tom Holland's Peter Parker exploring the multiverse, fighting iconic villains from previous adaptations, and even meeting Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Mans. Saying the MCU needs more street-level stories doesn't mean the multiverse is a bad concept. It's given us many entertaining stories like No Way Home, but as it ends with everyone's memory of Peter erased, it should have Spider-Man back to his roots. Spider-Man 4 is currently in development, and we can only speculate its plot at this point, but it's likely Marvel will listen to the fans advocating for a street-level movie for its most iconic street-level hero. With the Iron Spider suit retired and no multiversal threats, it's the perfect moment for Peter to start working for the Daily Bugle as a photographer, and to start fighting crime around the neighborhood in New York City. With the Multiverse saga coming to an end soon, Spider-Man will probably be traveling to the multiverse again at some point in the near future, just like in the Secret Wars event. But after that, many fans argue Marvel should keep Spider-Man more grounded. In the next saga, instead of collaborating with the Avengers all the time, Spider-Man could cross over with more street-level heroes in New York City like Daredevil and the Punisher.
Assemble.
Give the Multiverse saga a grand finale. Just like the Infinity Stones haven't been relevant in the MCU again since Avengers Endgame, the end of the Multiverse saga should keep the concept dormant for the duration of the next saga. The grand finale of the Multiverse saga will be the ending of Secret Wars, from which it will be easier to reboot the individual franchises. Once the multiverse is restored at the end of the Secret Wars, each series could rewrite certain aspects of their world. In the MCU, not only the same thing could happen, but the franchise can make the next saga be all set only in one universe because of it. This could mean, for example, only telling stories set on Earth 616. Another possibility is only telling stories set in different universes, where mutants and the X-Men exist. Since it's looking like it's gonna be the Mutant Saga, and a reboot of Spider-Man and other franchises if they are continued to be set in their universe. With the MCU rebooted, it would be the best moment to make street-level stories, focusing on crossovers within one universe. With high stakes like global conflicts and alien invasions, it's impossible not to go from there when writing a new script in a shared universe. But the next saga in the MCU can keep the stakes local initially, making standalone stories focused on each important hero or team first, giving them the spotlight in a classic hero versus villain project. The direction would make the Secret Wars crossover a much more significant event. It would be the end of the MCU exploring different realities, at least for now.
Captain America.
Mr. Lang?
It's an honor.
Explore different characters. As we've seen, once Secret Wars rewrites reality, the MCU can pivot to street-level stories. Heroes like Spider-Man would fit into this hypothetical street-level saga, but others, they just might not. Some characters that played a big role in the Multiverse Saga should give space to others who either only appeared in TV shows or have yet to be adapted. Some, like the Sentry, could be an exception, as it seems like he'll be a minor character in Thunderbolts in 2025, and he should get his own film somewhere in 2028. It would be a good time for X-Men films, for explaining the inclusion of mutants, or other characters when necessary. There's also the possibility of making mutants join Earth-616 because their reality is not among the ones saved in the end of Secret Wars.
Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
It would also be amazing to see Blade and Black Knight team up in a movie, throwing back to the ending of the Eternals. These characters wouldn't be new to the MCU, but they deserve their own movies and would fit perfectly into the tone shift strategy. It would definitely be incredible to see some brand new characters. Mutants like Wolfsbane, Sunspot, Magic could be incorporated into MCU X-Men movies. Another interesting way to shake things up in the next saga is making a Miles Morales story set on Earth-616, taking on the mantle of Spider-Man when Peter Parker retires, or teaming up with Peter.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
Exploring new film styles. Going into the next saga, the MCU can keep the same universe interesting by taking more risks in terms of film language. The Multiverse Saga films have mostly had a somewhat similar tone of epic adventure, although this saga has generally expanded the genres of the MCU. One of the coolest things about getting MCU series is how superhero stories were told in ways that contrast with traditional Marvel movies. A series like WandaVision redefined the MCU completely, and the next saga could bring that same approach to its movies. For example, Moon Knight would be perfect to front a psychological thriller film. Ghost Rider could get a Johnny Blaze action film, but the MCU could also make a film within the Western genre with a standalone period film set in the mid-19th century, telling the story of Carter Slade, a former Ghost Rider who uses the alias Phantom Rider. With the success of the What If animated series, a few years from now would be a good time to try a live-action What If project. You know that so many actors would love to come back and do these characters in such different, eccentric ways, and it would just be a one-off as well. The Marvel 2099 comics would be the perfect source material, showing iterations of heroes in a cyberpunk setting. That would keep the idea of the multiverse alive without fully committing to it. But the multiverse itself can also be the driving force of the saga after that.
You somehow crossed through a tear in space-time. You are now in a reality parallel to your own.
The MCU can bring the multiverse back in a new way later. The second time, the franchise can explore the multiverse concept in a different way. After finishing the current plans for the Multiverse Saga, the MCU can go back to focusing on one universe. The multiverse phenomenon will naturally occur again. No matter what the focus is of the next saga, the one after that can simply be set in another universe, referring to the multiverse without being about multiversal traveling. This could be the transition to an Ultimate Saga, set on another universe based on the Ultimate Marvel comics. It could adapt the Ultimate Invasion plot and make Reed Richards be the villain, the Maker, contrasting with the traditional Fantastic Four stories in which he's the superhero, Mr. Fantastic. Do you agree that the MCU should shift gears and take more risks? Should Marvel stop telling stories about the multiverse after Secret Wars? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Couldn't have broken like their mom's favorite vase or the dime store window. Had to go for the whole multiverse, huh? When comics introduce nice things, it's only a matter of time before they are broken. Some of the largest comic book stories revolve around the very fabric of the multiverse being destroyed. Sometimes it's on purpose,
The TVA.
sometimes it's an accident, and sometimes it's just a side effect. Across all of comics, several characters have broken the multiverse, putting quite literally everyone and everything at risk. Which heroes and villains have had maybe the worst Monday imaginable? Let's find out right now. First up is our two lovable gods of mischief, who found themselves in a weird multiversal on-again, off-again relationship.
This is the good part.
That's right, we are talking about Sylvie and Loki. When Loki was taken by the TVA, he aided them in finding Sylvie, a variant of himself who had been giving the TVA trouble since she was a kid. From that moment, it became her life's mission to find whoever was behind the TVA and kill them. Eventually, as Loki fell for Sylvie, he wanted to help her complete this goal. When the two successfully enchanted Eliath, a cloud-shaped guard dog at the end of time, they made it to the Citadel, home of He Who Remains, creator of the TVA.
This is wild.
After a long talk, He Who Remains convinced Loki that killing him was a terrible idea. If this was done, an entire army of variants, much more dangerous than himself, would be unleashed on the multiverse. Sylvie, blind with rage, decided that she didn't care. And after a brief fight, Loki was sent back to the TVA, freeing Sylvie up to stab He Who Remains directly through the chest. The last we saw of this was that Loki found himself in a different TVA, where no one recognized him.
What?
And a large statue of Kang the Conqueror stood in the center of the complex. We are still waiting to see all the repercussions this had on the MCU multiverse. But that one fateful knife that Sylvie used split the sacred timeline into 1 million branches, and completely broke the multiverse, likely for years to come. What do you get when you cross a teenage hero with a middle-aged wizard and a quest to get into college?
Seriously?
You get one of the first instances of a broken multiverse in the MCU. When Peter Parker asked Stephen Strange to make everyone forget that he is Spider-Man, and then kind of changed his mind mid-spell, the multiverse briefly cracked wide open. Every character from multiverses known and unknown began coming to Earth 616, so long as they knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Through a series of mishaps, several villains and other Spider-Men were transported to the MCU, and together with other long-running Spider-Men, Peter was able to send them home by making the entire universe forget about him. This was the first crack in the multiverse, and if it was cracked, it was definitely broken.
I'm sorry, kid.
Not only were characters temporarily transported there, but Peter changed their futures by curing several of the villains, meaning that their universes are changed forever now. Not to mention, for some reason, the Vulture was transported to the universe of Morbius.
Walk through those doors, you forget any of this happened.
Which I know makes no sense and proves only further that Peter broke the multiverse.
Come on, man, please.
One of the most famous DC multiverse storylines is Flashpoint. One day, Barry Allen awoke to find that his entire world was different. His mother was alive and he had no powers. Atlantis and Themyscira were separately trying to conquer the world. Thomas Wayne became Batman and Martha Wayne became the Joker, and Superman was nowhere to be found. Barry determined that Reverse Flash had used his powers to alter the timeline and make it so the Justice League never formed. However, he was incorrect, as later his memories would be restored, and he would learn that Barry himself harnessed the full power of the Speed Force and used it to travel in time to stop Reverse Flash from killing his mother. He shattered the realities of all his allies, and knew he had to reverse what he had done. By doing this, several universes merged, including the Vertigo and Wildstorm universes. 10 years of history are erased, and the multiverse is essentially broken, though Barry fixed it as much as he could. For crying out loud, Steven, in just 2 movies, Doctor Strange appears to have broken the multiverse twice. Only this time it seems like most of the blame should go to the Scarlet Witch.
I need you to focus.
After basically creating her own universe, Wanda began reading the Darkhold, which took her to a new level of insanity. When Doctor Strange met America Chavez, he was introduced to a much quicker way to travel the multiverse. Unfortunately, so was Wanda. In a desperate attempt to find new children to be hers, she wanted America's power. She dreamwalked to follow Stephen Strange and America Chavez through the multiverse, setting several different universes on paths to destruction. Several variants of Doctor Strange proved to be destructive to their worlds as well, causing incursions like their Skittles. At the end of the day, the Scarlet Witch was defeated and saw her own wrongdoings, but the damage to the multiverse is likely irreversible. With a new third eye, last we saw Steven, he was headed off to stop a coming incursion thanks to the events of the film. But don't worry, I'm sure everyone in the MCU has learned their lesson. In the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse film, 2 villains from a universe teamed up to break the multiverse. When Wilson Fisk decided he wanted his family back, he decided to search the multiverse for a replacement wife and son. Messed up? Absolutely. He enlisted the help of Dr. Olivia Octavius, the Doc Ock of the universe, in order to build a super collider capable of opening portals to different universes. When the collider malfunctioned after Peter Parker attempted to stop it, the walls between universes became transparent. Characters like Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man Noir, Peter Porker, Penny Parker, and an older Peter Parker found their way to the universe of Miles Morales.
No other reason?
Their presence in the universe put them in danger, however, as their molecules destined to return home. In a final fight to send the Spider People home and destroy the Collider, the universe began to blend together in what appeared to be the start of an incursion, before anyone even knew what an incursion was. However, Miles was successful in stopping the two crazed villains from destroying the multiverse, even though they did break it for a brief period. The Anti-Monitor is a supreme being from the antimatter DC universe. Billions of years ago, he began his ultimate path of destruction. He awoke just before the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, and wants to destroy the positive universe and all variations of it. This horrible villain builds up an insane amount of antimatter energy, and uses it to fulfill his goals. Several universes are completely erased from existence thanks to the shockwave he releases. His destruction leaves only 5 universes whose heroes band together to stop him. These 5 universes then band together to form one singular remaining universe. It's hard to think of a more destructive villain when it comes to breaking the multiverse than the Anti-Monitor. To be fair, I guess if you were around for billions of years, you'd eventually run out of things to do as well. One Marvel villain with a proclivity for destruction is of course the Mad Titan Thanos. In a Marvel story called Marvel the End, Thanos gains the power of a weapon called the Heart of the Universe. This power gives him knowledge of the universe capable of destroying all life. He becomes all-powerful, angering the cosmic beings of the Marvel Universe. Thanos goes on a killing spree and defeats every superhero across every universe. He eventually absorbs all creation, including the likes of Eternity, Infinity, and the Living Tribunal, basically becoming the only being in existence, as he absorbs the entire multiverse as well. Eventually, Thanos is visited by Adam Warlock, who convinces him to do the right thing. Thanos, with his newfound power, recreates all of the life he had destroyed, and even heroically sacrifices himself in order to do so.
I'll do it myself.
So at the end of the day, he's not all bad, right? Yeah, I know, he's the worst. In an Elseworlds event, a spoof on Comics World created the characters of Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk. These two small characters of pure comedy are essentially given the power of gods. They appear to annoy Batman and Superman, but instead decided to fight each other. This fight barrels over their entire universe and destroys it. They eventually move to other multiple realities, including Earth 2, 3, X, S, and C. Several other universes are destroyed as well in the midst of their intense battle. However, at the end, the two are beat and decide to laugh it off. They even go so far as to return everything to normal and promise to meet up again next week. Mr. Fantastic has one big brain, and sometimes that brain puts the multiverse in terrible danger. After the death of Galactus, an entity known as Abraxas reigns terror on all creation. Abraxas killed several heralds, alternate versions of Galactus, and eventually was headed straight for Earth 616. The Fantastic Four were all that stood between him and total destruction. In order to save the universe, Mr. Fantastic knew he had to destroy it. He used the ultimate nullifier to wipe out all of existence. The universe then recreated itself but left out Abraxas in that recreation. Mr. Fantastic knew that breaking the multiverse was the only way to set it back to normal. After the Sinestro Corps War, Superman Prime became lost in the multiverse. He eventually tried to find his way home looking for Earth Prime and destroying all the realities he believed didn't fulfill him. At the same time, the former Captain Atom, now known as Monarch and powered by quantum energy, built an army to take over the entire multiverse. This storyline was one real bad day for the multiverse in general, as eventually Superman Prime and Monarch went head-to-head destroying the universe they fought in. Earth 51 was believed to be the only perfect Earth in the multiverse by Superman Prime, but at the time he found it, Monarch's army had laid waste to it. This is what led to the two's grand conflict, which led to the destruction of what was left of Earth 51. Considering several universes were destroyed along the way, Superman Prime is definitely guilty when it comes to breaking the multiverse. Some of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe are the Beyonders and Molecule Man. The Beyonders are so powerful that they have the capability of destroying the entire multiverse, which they did basically for fun leading up to the Secret Wars event. Molecule Man was created by the Beyonders and basically serves as a bomb capable of destroying universes. Molecule Man and Dr. Doom team up to destroy all the other versions of Molecule Man across every universe in an attempt to stop his creator. However, the two fail and the Beyonders successfully destroy the multiverse, but Doom uses their power to create Battleworld for the few beings left alive. In the What If animated MCU show, we saw the multiverse put in probably the greatest danger it has been in to date. This was because in a universe where Ultron won, he went on to become one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse.
I will bring peace.
He even became so powerful that he could sense the presence of the Watcher, allowing him to learn of the existence of multiple different realities. With the Infinity Stones, he sought to conquer these other realities. The Watcher broke his oath and intervened to stop the Infinity-powered Ultron from destroying the multiverse. He gathered warriors such as Captain Carter, Thor, Killmonger, T'Challa, Gamora, and Doctor Strange in order to form the Guardians of the Multiverse. The Watcher was able to defeat Ultron and trap Arnim Zola and Killmonger in a pocket reality to be watched over by the Doctor Strange who had destroyed his own universe. Overall, the power-hungry villain broke the multiverse enough to force one of the strongest beings in it to intervene. In 2014, Grant Morrison created a DC Multiverse story that essentially brought the Marvel Universe in as Earth 8 of the DC Universe. Only everything was slightly off for brand purposes and avoiding lawsuits. For example, a hero called the Thunderer, who definitely wasn't Thor, set out to stop interdimensional beings known as the Gentry.
Surprised you actually knew who that was.
The Gentry were a group of interdimensional beings who moved from universe to universe attempting to destroy them. The Thunderer recruits heroes across the multiverse and forms the Justice Incarnate. He returns to Earth 7, a copy and paste of the Ultimate Marvel Universe, in order to stop the Gentry. At this point, they discover that the Gentry are a group of villains who serve a being known as Empty Hand. This being turns out to be so powerful that he has already destroyed several other multiverses, and tears apart the Earth 7 reality before banishing the Justice Incarnate. In one of my favorite comic stories to exist, Deadpool literally killed the Marvel Universe.
I'm sure they're all FDA approved.
In fact, in this storyline, Deadpool went so far beyond what other characters have done to break the multiverse that he eventually found and likely killed the people who literally create the multiverse. After a third voice appeared in Deadpool's head, he was awoken to the truth of this reality, that he was a comic book character living in the pages of a comic book. After learning this, Deadpool went on a rampage killing literally every character in his universe. Eventually, by the end of the story, we see that Deadpool has traveled outside of the comic book to the literal room where the writers of his comic worked. We are left to assume that Deadpool then went on to kill every person writing his existence. It's possibly the greatest example of a character destroying the multiverse in the most characteristically accurate way possible.
It's Doom time! Doom o'clock! Doom-ageddon! Doom is coming for the MCU. And with a name like Dr. Doom, you kind of know where his allegiances are going to lie. But with the upcoming Secret Wars and the wrap-up to the Multiverse Saga already imminent, what if Dr. Doom is in fact the hero of this saga? What happens if Doom is the one who ultimately saves the day and beats Kang in the Kang Dynasty? How would that fallout affect Secret Wars? Well, I'm discussing that right now. With Phase 4 coming to an end, we've begun our slow march to the Kang Dynasty, and if I'm going to be talking about how Dr. Doom is going to be the ultimate hero of the Multiverse Saga, before becoming its ultimate villain, then I need to discuss what the MCU needs to do in order to get to that point. First things first, we need a Dr. Doom.
For you is, are you with me or against me?
Doom hasn't been introduced yet, and at the time of this video, Black Panther Wakanda Forever hasn't hit theaters. But there's something really interesting, I think, about the placement of this film. It was announced that Black Panther Wakanda Forever would be the end of Phase 4, but the big question is, why? Ant-Man Quantumania is the next film after Wakanda Forever, and doesn't that seem like a more logical endpoint for the phase with its full introduction of Kang the Conqueror? If Kang is really going to be the next big bad threat, you would think introducing him to end of phase makes a bit more sense than at the beginning. Hey, I can see it both ways, but that's just what I think. But I also think there's a specific reason for ending the phase with Wakanda Forever, and it's not just because I think the film looks incredible and ends the phase on a spectacular high note. It's because I think Doom will be introduced during it. I really don't believe Doom and Latveria should play a part in the overall struggle between Wakanda and Atlantis, though. I think that takes away from the central struggle with a distracting future bad guy. I mean, there's already so much going on with establishing the new Black Panther and fleshing out Namor, so there's not really a spot for Doom. I really don't want the movie to be like Doom was secretly pulling the strings behind everything either. I think again that cheapens the central conflict. But I think Doom and Latveria could be introduced in Wakanda Forever, and it's where the seeds are planted that lead to Doom rising to power thanks to what we learn about him. So let's theorize about the future for a bit as we discuss Doom's introduction and overall role in the MCU. Here's my long-term core desire for the MCU's Doom. I want him to be a dark reflection of Iron Man. Sure, I want him to be evil and sinister and power hungry, but I also want him to be focused on the next big one. After the Avengers, Iron Man turned paranoid about future threats and spent a lot of time fretting about the looming shadow of Thanos. It led to things like Ultron, which, yeah, wasn't so great, but I'm sure a lot of the stuff he built to prepare came in handy.
Okay, pal, we're gonna get you out of town.
I want Doom to have that same sort of feeling. Here's my MCU tweak regarding his backstory. So I want to say the reason we haven't seen Doom yet in the MCU is because he wasn't the leader of Latveria. He spent a lot of his life bitterly believing that he should be on the throne, but never had the opportunity to truly rise up and take control. But Infinity War and the Snap changed all that. When half the universe was turned to dust, maybe that was the catalyst Doom needed in order to raise up his remaining forces and forcibly seize power. Maybe the old leader turned dusty and left a big vacant seat. So Doom had 5 years to build out Latveria in his image, and when everyone came back, I'm sure that Doom very nicely let the old leader live, right? Probably not. But I like the idea of what that does to Doom's mindset. Now he's a bit paranoid about the next big threat to Earth. Not because he cares about saving the lives of innocent people, but because he's afraid of losing the power he's fought so hard to get. And this leads Doom to start creating and inventing dangerous weaponry and slowly edging his way into world affairs so that he can begin his world domination plans so that when the next big thing comes, Doom can be ready. This side storyline can play out in Captain America, New World Order, and the Thunderbolts. I mean, yeah, we know the leader is going to be the big bad of New World Order, but I really think that film should further explore the ramifications of the Thanos snap, as well as what happened when everyone came back 5 years later. They started to explore it in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, so having New World Order continue that thread by showing how maybe certain countries that were weak before, like Latveria, have now positioned themselves into positions of extreme global dominance would be fun. And then the Thunderbolts could even be about some mission where the Thunderbolts have to go into Latveria for some reason. Not sure what else they would do. I guess they could fight multiverse versions of evil heroes since it's the end of Phase 5, but I like tying their story into Doom's rise to power. So by having Doom fully established in the MCU as this global threat, that's when you have your Fantastic Four movie. Obviously, the big problem with all the previous Fantastic Four films was how they tried to tie in the Fantastic Four's origins with Doom's origins, and it never worked out well. Seriously, they messed things up twice. What are the chances of that? But establishing Doom in the MCU beforehand allows the Fantastic Four to fully take center stage in their movie without worrying about how to cram Doom into the story. And I sort of like the idea of this really villainous threat rising up and slowly spreading his dark influence everywhere, and just when it looks like there isn't a group to stop him, boom, that's when we meet the Fantastic Four. I'm not quite sure yet how to tie in the Fantastic Four's movie with Doom's current journey. I know in the comics and in the previous films they have Doom and Reed as old school chums turned mortal enemies, but honestly, let's forget that entirely. How about these two come into conflict due to the Negative Zone? The Negative Zone obviously plays a big part in the Fantastic Four's history, and maybe both sides could be on the quest for antimatter. Maybe Doom wants it to build the most advanced weaponry in the universe, and Reed and his family are the only ones capable of getting it or stopping Doom from getting it. Or, I got a better idea. So take what I just explained about Doom, right? How he actually, in his own power-hungry way, is trying to prepare and stop the next big attack on Earth, right? Well, what could he actually do to prevent this? Sure, he could build himself a whole army of robots or invent a machine that causes you to throw up your insides or something equally sinister, but what could he actively do in order to stop Kang for good? Well, how about trying to stop Kang from ever being born? Yeah, dealing with Kang means dealing with a lot of different variants, and most likely Kang comes from a different Earth other than our own. But what if it's revealed that the biggest Kang baddie that we meet is actually a descendant from Earth 616's Reed Richards? Yeah, that gets a little timey-wimey and probably requires an overly complicated retcon or explanation, but if you squint, it could possibly work. And what if Doom finds out about this and sets out to destroy any relative or descendant of Kang in order to stop the threat before it happens? That means he would want to eliminate Reed Richards, and that's what locks the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom into a bitter rivalry. And how crazy would it be if right when Doom and the Fantastic Fantastic Four's main fight comes to a head, right when it seems like they couldn't hate each other more, that's when Kang comes knocking, setting up the Kang Dynasty and a chance for Doom to become the hero.
You're welcome.
So now let's talk about how the Kang Dynasty could play out, and it's important to understand the context from a comic perspective. Not that the MCU has ever really bothered to follow the comics for their big event films, but they at least provide a good foundation. Anyways, the Kang Dynasty is a comic arc that sees Kang the Conqueror arrive on Earth with his son Marcus in order to do what he does best and starts conquering. He basically starts showing Earth all these dark futures that potentially awaits it and insists that he needs to conquer Earth in order to save it. Yeah, he's that kind of bad guy. He then does a tremendously smart thing. He doesn't just arrive with his own army. No, he makes a worldwide announcement that any group that conquers in his name will be gifted some territory, as well as a place in his new world order. This causes a bunch of villainous foes and groups to rise up and split all of our heroes' time, which makes it easier for Kang and his future army to stroll through and basically take the keys to Earth. At the time, most of the main Avengers are stranded in space, which leaves Earth no choice but to surrender to Kang. Bummer. This storyline of a conquered Earth actually goes on for quite a bit, which is pretty surprising. One thing I have to mention is that in this storyline, a giant holographic version of Kang the Conqueror fights a giant holographic version of Captain America in space. If we don't get some version of that, then what are we even doing, people? Anyways, if the MCU sort of follows this whole Kang situation and his slow conquering of Earth would lead to some major ramifications, and it's a great opportunity for Doom to rise up and join the overall resistance.
Welcome, Thunderer.
As awesome as Jonathan Majors is going to be and how absolutely jacked he looks, he's not gonna win in the end. Sure, he may win for a short amount of time, but the good guys will retake the planet. But the most interesting thing is how as soon as they announced the Kang Dynasty, they revealed that Avengers Secret Wars will take place just a few months later. Now, if that means what everyone thinks that means, then Dr. Doom will be the big bad of Secret Wars. So there's a few ways this next section can unfold. Kang could either take the place of the Beyonder in the comic books, or the Avengers can go to the Beyonder in order to stop Kang in the MCU. I personally don't know which one I like more because they both have pros and cons. Let's discuss both. So if Kang takes the place of the Beyonder and comes to Earth with this power to rewrite reality, it would not only be dangerous, but also give us a chance for a true Battle World adaptation. Instead of the Beyonder being the one pulling the strings and putting heroes and villains against each other on Battleworld for fun, it could be Kang who somehow gains this ability after all of his conquering, and then sets that plan in motion during and after the Kang Dynasty. Imagine a situation where Avengers the Kang Dynasty is the massive Avengers film we all expect with all of our heroes, but then when Kang fully takes over by the end of the movie, he transports a select group of characters to Battleworld as both punishment and amusement. Then one of the movies leading up to Secret Wars could be a smaller scale film that features some of our core characters and fan favorites fighting it out in this new reality. So then, when Battleworld is concluded, Doom is the one who comes out on top and ultimately saves the day. He could stop Kang once and for all, but by doing so, he basically steals Kang's powers and then rewrites reality in his own Doom-esque image, setting up Secret Wars. The problem with this would be, one, it makes Kang into this reality warping entity who can set up his own battle world, which isn't necessarily what he normally does in the comics, and two, we don't really want to have back-to-back stories where Kang rewrites reality in Kang Dynasty and then Doom does it again in Secret Wars. So the other way I mentioned is having our heroes and Doom travel the multiverse in order to find a solution to their Kang problem. This could result in them finding more powerful multiversal entities like the Beyonder and Molecule Man. But instead of saving the day by brokering a deal, Doom eliminates the Beyonder and steals his power. He then uses it to vanquish Kang, but then, like before, that sets up Doom's Secret Wars. My problem with that is having the Beyonder's abilities be the answer to stopping Kang feels like it takes our Avengers out of the equation, but maybe there's interesting fallout from this. It would be fascinating to see our heroes forced to compromise a bit and trust Doom, only for Doom to turn around and betray them. And I just sort of want to see a pure villain work with our heroes, not an anti-hero bad guy who who's secretly a good guy, but a true, full-on villain whose goals align with our heroes. So overall, the path to get there may be a little messy, but what this does is set Doom up to be the ultimate MCU hero by being the one to end Kang, but in doing so unleashes his full might as the Multiverse Saga's true big bad afterwards. And I just want to end this by briefly discussing what that would mean going forward. What does the plot of Secret Wars look like if Doom was the big hero first and then the villain? Sure, I say big hero, but of course taking down Kang and presumably his variants and his allies will take the collective force of all the heroes across the multiverse. I'm just saying Doom would be the one to ultimately eliminate Kang for good. And this brings me back to my original idea of making Kang the darker, twisted version of Iron Man. In Endgame, Tony had all the power of the universe in the palm of his hand and sacrificed himself for the greater good. He ended the threat and then got to rest. Well, if we're following the trajectory of an Iron Man-esque path, then Doom would be in the same situation. He would have the power of the universe in the palm of his hand, eliminate the bad guy, but only while making himself stronger in the process. By being in the same situation and choosing to better himself rather than the world around him, it would be a nice bit of symmetry and basically set up Dr. Doom as the ultimate evil version of Iron Man. I think that would be awesome and give Secret Wars more heft. Of course, Doom won't reign as king forever. The end of Secret Wars would see our final group of heroes band together and save reality from this devastating new timeline. Yeah, I'm sure we'll lose some of our heroes along the way, presumably the ones who are dealing with the two biggest villains of them all, old age and Marvel contracts, but in the end, everything will be returned to normal so that Phase 7 can presumably start. I don't necessarily see Doom surviving past Phase 7, but who knows? Anything is possible in the MCU. But overall, this is why Doom needs to be fleshed out early. He has the potential to be both the greatest hero the MCU has ever seen, as well as its greatest villain. It just depends on how the MCU decides to present his character. I'm not saying my way is the absolute best, because yeah, there are certainly holes and flaws in my reasoning, but by making Doom's journey and character similar to Iron Man, I think is the best thing going forward. But let me know your thoughts about that in the comments below. The reason I like the multiverse is because it not only gives us fun variants of our favorite heroes and villains, but also allows us to see how our universe stacks up in comparison. Today I'm talking about some of the most powerful suits in the whole multiverse. Yes, it does mean a lot of suits from our universe make the cut, but it's interesting to compare those to other suits not from our own world. What is truly the most powerful suit in the multiverse? What makes a powerful suit so awesome? How many times will Iron Man show up on this list? Let's find all that out right now. First things first, let's talk about the Godbuster armor. I mean, that has to be first up on a list of most powerful suits, right? It's like the most powerful creation in existence. Yes, it's one of those items that's so powerful that people chose to destroy it, because then there would be no more conflicts ever. But for that brief time, it was the greatest thing Tony Stark had ever built. So the origins of this suit stem from virtual reality. Tony was hanging out in the metaverse, hanging out in Escape, when the system basically came alive and captured him. Tony, please, for the love of God, watch a movie or something. Never create a virtual reality and stop creating AI, because eventually they all turn bad. Anyways, Escape did come with some benefits. While in that environment, Tony's brain shook off all the cobwebs and unlocked its true potential. There was no limitation to what he could create. Did you ever learn that thing about how we only use 10% of our brains? I never knew if that was really true or not, but in this comic and this situation, Tony was able to use all 100% of his big brain, and he created the ultimate weapon. The Godbuster armor defeated the evil AI known as Motherboard and could probably go on to do literally anything it wanted. But once he was in the real world, Tony had his moment of clarity where he deemed the suit to be too powerful to ever have anyone use it and destroyed it. As much as I respect Tony's ending in Endgame, I now imagine him using the stones to snap himself into the ultimate Godbuster suit of armor and using it to kick Thanos' butt. But yeah, for its unlimited potential, this is one of the strongest suits in all of Marvel history. So in the MCU, Celestials are coming / are already here. Phase 4 established that the Earth is just a giant egg that was created to hatch another Celestial once it had enough juice. But thanks to the Eternals, that catastrophe was prevented. At least, sort of. There's still a giant dude sticking out of the Earth that you would think would cause massive tidal shifts in the ocean patterns or whatever, and have everyone on Earth question the meaning of life. But I guess we'll just ignore all of that for now. But what happens if the Celestials deem Earth to be unworthy and come back to step on us? Well, in the comics, that's what the God Killer armor was for. This was a massive suit of armor that I think cost up $1 jillion and was powered by 8 nuclear reactors. Yeah, it was a huge undertaking, and although in theory this suit is the most powerful thing on Earth, it didn't do so well in the actual Celestial fight. Like, don't get me wrong, if Tony used this suit all the time, then villains like the Mandarin or Obadiah Stane probably wouldn't stand a chance, but when it was up against some of the most powerful beings in existence, it broke almost immediately. And yes, given its lifespan, you may object to this being so high on this list, but come on, it's a giant Celestial fighting suit of armor. That makes it incredibly powerful. If Tony was still alive, we'd totally get something like this in the MCU. Like, Fury's sword Space would transform into this the next time that Arishem comes to judge us. I think the only thing the MCU is missing so far is a giant robot fight, but maybe one day. So this sorta counts as out in the multiverse since it's a what-if story, but the next thing I want to discuss is the Sorcerer Supreme armor. This is the blend of the technological and the mystical, with Tony Stark becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. So in this story, Stark and Strange were driving together on that fateful night of the car crash, and after Strange lost the use of his hands, Stark became guilt-ridden and obsessed with helping Strange. This led the pair to the Ancient One, and bada bing, bada boom, Tony Stark became the Sorcerer Supreme, and Doctor Strange became his slightly bitter butler. But I personally love this combination. The Stark Sorcerer Supreme armor takes the best of both Tony Stark and Stephen Strange and smashes them together. So Tony is this magic-wielding sorcerer in an advanced tech suit. The Eye of Agamotto is embedded in his chest and can sense incoming magical attacks. It even has a feature of suggesting counter spells when necessary. Yeah, this suit is so powerful because it accentuates an already powerful individual. And I love blends of tech and magic together. When done right, it makes for an incredible combination. And I want to build off that last idea for a bit. I've mentioned Iron Man suits for the first 3 entries, so let me turn my attention over to the other tech genius in the Marvel Universe who makes awesome suits and has a good grasp on the mystic arts. That's right, it's Doom time, baby! While the Sorcerer Supreme armor is something that can only happen in a what-if comic in a different universe, the mystical Doom armor is very much in our world. And let me tell you, it's definitely the creepiest thing on this list. I mean, I can safely guarantee that no other suit of armor on this list is made up of human skin. So Doom loves to blend mysticism with tech, and in order to get this armor, he had to make a deal where he would sacrifice something he could never replace. He chose a woman he loved in the past, Valeria, and upon his sacrifice, her skin transformed into the leather that held the armor together. Ew, that's probably worse than Thanos sacrificing Gamora, right? Like, the equivalent of this would be Thanos chucking Gamora off that cliff, and then her mangled body turning into the Soul Stone for Thanos to wear around. Yeah, I don't see any situation where this suit is allowed to be featured in the MCU. Alright, it's tough to choose which Venom symbiote I want to include on this list. And I know what you're saying. CBR voice, aren't you making this list? What does it matter how many you include? You have like 50 Iron Man entries. Spread some love to Venom. Well, Venom 2099 is the one I want to include because I haven't talked about it yet. Yes, the Man in Black storyline gave us that ultra-powerful Enigma Force symbiote Venom, but there's also something really interesting about Venom 2099. And yes, this is totally a suit. It's a living suit, but a suit nonetheless. Anyways, the Venom 2099 is actually Kron Stone, who is the older half-brother of Miguel O'Hara. He goes through a similar arc as Eddie Brock did. Stone was this angry villain who bonded with the Venom symbiote and became a major thorn in Miguel's side. But the whole reason I wanted to mention this one is because of its evolution. In the future, the Venom symbiote evolves, gaining new powers like acid blood and acid saliva. And then it was revealed that the symbiote became more than just a suit and bonded with Stone on a molecular level, giving Venom 2099 the power to shapeshift. And the reason I mentioned this one was because I kind of want to see a similar storyline play out in Venom 3. Come on, having the trilogy end with Eddie Brock and Venom having to bond on a molecular level to beat an unknown threat would be fitting, right? Anyways, Venom 2099 totally rules. I feel like Iron Lad doesn't normally show up on lists like these, but I wanted to include him here. Not only because I think his suit is interesting and powerful, but because Iron Lad should totally be in the MCU. So Iron Lad is Nathaniel Richards, aka a Kang variant. Yeah, the whole time travel thing is complicated, but at his core, he's basically an Iron Man and Kang hybrid. His suit is a neurokinetic armor that's made from a rare synthetic alloy from the 40th century, so you can't just pick it up at your local store. But due to his connection and his genius, he can control the suit subconsciously, and it has all the features that you would expect from a futuristic alternate universe Iron Man suit. I really want to see Iron Lad in the MCU because that would be so interesting to see a Kang variant model himself off of Iron Man and see those ramifications and join the Young Avengers, all of that. Plus, that's easy to make him part of the multiverse, which I think justifies the inclusion of his suit on this list. Apocalypse is one of those unfair villains who is insanely powerful without the suit, but then on top of that has this suit of armor that makes him one of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. In the comics, his suit was crafted by Celestials, and it came with all these nifty gizmos and gadgets. I know that they're weaving the mutants in the MCU gradually and revealing that they've probably been on Earth this whole time, but before the Miss Marvel and Namor reveal, I really did want to see a different version of Apocalypse from the multiverse who has just this unimaginably dangerous suit of power. After the lackluster Age of Apocalypse movie, Apocalypse deserves a second chance. Heck, get Oscar Isaac to play him again and really get weird with the multiverse. Yeah, High Evolutionary has a name that Rocket is definitely going to make fun of in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. His real name is Herbert Wyndham, which is the type of name that drives you to become a supervillain, so no one calls you that anymore. Anyways, I'm including High Evolutionary's suit not only because we're about to get up close and personal with it in live action during Volume 3, but because the suit deserves a special shout out. High Evolutionary is one of the smartest baddies in the universe, and he used his gift with genetics to craft an exoskeleton suit that protects Herbert's body, even from death. Yeah, it has something called the Reconstitution Protocol, where the suit is smart enough to hold fragments of Herbert's genetic code, so if Herbert is ever killed or seriously injured, the suit can rebuild him. Isn't that sort of terrifyingly cool? I think it is. Okay, back to Iron Man for a second, because now's the time for the Phoenix busting armor. This one is a little self-explanatory, no? It was designed by Tony and Hank Pym to battle the incoming Phoenix Force. You know, one of the strongest forces in the universe. Yeah, good luck building a suit of armor against that. I wish I could have been in the room where Hank and Tony talked the design for this. Like, what's your planning process even like? You just sit around and draw big guns on a whiteboard or something? And yeah, this didn't go so great. Although you could technically call the suit a success for the way it broke apart the Phoenix Force, things turned south when the fragments of the Phoenix Force went into 5 nearby X-Men. Huge bummer. Superior Iron Man hails from a different universe that asks the question, what if Tony Stark never had his change of heart? Yeah, he turns into a big ol' villain and is incredibly dangerous. And without that pesky thing called morals or conscience, he's able to do some pretty wicked stuff, all with the help of his specialty suit. It's called the Endosim armor, and it's based off of symbiote biology. It's a liquid metal that hardens as soon as it comes into contact with the user's body and then establishes psionic bonds between it and the user. It's all the best qualities of a symbiote and Tony's tech without much of its weaknesses, as that universe's Tony fixed one of the symbiote's weaknesses by creating a shield for sonic attacks. Out of all of Tony's suits on this list, this is probably the one I want to see the most in the MCU because it would mean superior Iron Man in the MCU, which is the one thing I'm really hoping we see in the future. Okay, this list has a trend of painting gigantic Iron Man suit as some of the most powerful in the multiverse, so this entry, I'm gonna switch it up and talk about the gigantic Spider-Man suit instead. That's right, it's Leo Pardon. In this alternate universe, Spider-Man is the controller of a massive robot that visited Earth and has the ability to transform from spacecraft to awesome robot guy. This was revealed in the Spider-Geddon storyline, which saw a bunch of different alternate reality Spider-Men team up to fight an ultimate evil. And if you think Spider-Man with the gigantic robot is ridiculous, I'll inform you that this was actually a reference to the Japanese Spider-Man TV show, which featured something similar. You know what people always say, Spider-Man is great and all, but they should really put him in a Power Rangers-esque robot. And guess what? They did. So let's stay on the Spider-Man train for a second and talk about one of the most powerful and most interesting Miles Morales suits. Of course, Miles Morales originally came from a different universe before being so popular that they crossed him over permanently, but his most powerful suit came when he unfortunately encountered Carnage, and the evil symbiote infected Miles. The results were arguably much cooler looking than the Venom symbiote infecting Peter Parker. The Miles Morales/Carnage suit unleashed devastating new power, and it took a second for Miles to get it all under control. And when he did, the result was one of the coolest looking symbiote suits around. Yeah, Carnage and Miles Morales are already two powerful characters separately, but combine them and you got something truly special. Okay, one more Doom suit. Now, this Doom War suit isn't as gross or terrifying as his mystical Doom armor, but I think this suit deserves special recognition. The Doom War armor stems from the Doom War comic arc, which sees Doom go to war with Wakanda over their vibranium supply. As soon as Doom is successful in his attack against T'Challa's country, Doom is able to make a suit completely out of vibranium and gives him enhanced abilities like metal control. It's only beatable once Black Panther activates a device that basically depowers all vibranium on Earth. But wouldn't this be wild to see in the MCU? Imagine Black Panther 2 or 3 ending with Wakanda choosing to destroy their vibranium supply so Dr. Doom doesn't reach unstoppable power? That'd be cool. So, in 2013's House of M storyline, we saw Wanda rewrite all of reality to make humans the minority and mutants the dominant individuals on the planet. And I like to think there's a universe out there in the MCU that reflects this. But this means humans are actively plotting a resistance, and that puts Iron Man front and center. That's right, it's my final Iron Man suit. Now, picking different reality Iron Man suits can be tricky because there's a lot, but I picked the one with the coolest name and the most intimidating design. It's the Sapien Deathmatch armor, and it looks like a transformer attempting to look like Iron Man. This suit is big and bulky, but also packs one heck of a punch thanks to all the armor, and it goes on to become a symbol of the Resistance. Last entry, and this one I wanted to let loose and have a little goblin fun. I'm giving Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, aka the guy with the hair that I want to see adapted in live action. You know what I'm talking about, it's those weird lines on his head that I've never quite understood. Anyways, Green Goblin has showcased a whole bevy of amazing villainous suits over the years, and I specifically wanted to give a special shout out to No Way Home and the new Multiverse Goblin costume. The first Spider-Man movie was later criticized for its goofy Green Goblin outfit, and No Way Home did the wise thing of letting Willem Dafoe play the Goblin with a rundown suit and no mask. Maybe this doesn't fall in line with the other suits on this list, but it's a powerful multiverse suit that allows the actor underneath it to shine, and I think that deserves special recognition.
Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness left the good doctor in a bit of a precarious position, which might leave some fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe wondering what the future of the character might look like, when we might see him next. Well, I actually have a few ideas for that. Ideas that I'd love to talk about in this very video. Of course, any discussion of Strange's future is gonna involve spoilers for Multiverse of Madness, so if you haven't seen it yet, maybe sit this one out and come back to the video later on after you've watched it. You won't regret it. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's start this video off by talking about the mid-credits scene and where things might go from there. You know the one that I'm talking about, the one with the light-haired woman in the fancy purple outfit who showed up to whisk Strange away on some grand adventure. Not the one featuring Pizza Papa Bruce Campbell finally being able to stop beating the crap out of himself. I wanted to do an entire video exploring the lore possibilities for Pizza Papa, but the higher-ups at CBR shot my pitch down, so that's sadly not gonna happen. That light-haired woman is presumably Clea, the leader of and Sorcerer Supreme for the Dark Dimension, niece to Dormammu and longtime love interest of Strange in the comics. Now, in that scene, she states that Strange caused a convergence event, and they needed to go to fix it, seemingly perfectly setting up the plot for a third Doctor Strange movie. And that might very well be the case. I mean, the setup for a plot is basically perfect. But if I had to venture a guess, that's probably not what we'll see in a future Strange 3. I just kind of feel like it's almost too straightforward of a plot for a Marvel movie. I know, it's not like Marvel does overly complicated, super twisty and turny storylines, but you get what I mean. Instead, they'll probably do like they did with Thor Ragnarok. At the end of Age of Ultron, it sounded like Thor was gonna go off on some grand adventure to find all the Infinity Stones. only for the beginning of Ragnarok to establish that he gave that venture up, and now he was off doing some other stuff. So if I were a betting man, I'd say that the next time we catch up with Doc Strange, him and Clea will have already fixed that whole situation and have established a bit of a working relationship with one another. Instead, I think we're gonna get another Clea-focused storyline as the plot of the next movie. In the comics, after Dormammu was ousted as ruler of the Dark Dimension, Clea's mother Umar took over, and wasn't exactly much better than her brother was. So Clea, alongside Strange and a handful of others, stepped up to the plate and usurped her, with Clea taking a seat on the throne instead. This is something that could work within the MCU, with some slight modifications, of course. Instead of having Umar be the big bad, they could very easily just leave Dormammu in charge of the Dark Dimension. This would make some fans very happy, as quite a few people have talked over the years about how odd it was that one of the biggest members of Strange's Rogues Gallery only appeared on film for about 5 minutes and didn't really do much. So giving Dormammu the chance to be an actual antagonist, not just a formless mass that serves only to raise the stakes for some other bad guy, would be pretty freaking awesome. And it'd allow for some more exploration of Clea as a character, since the entire plot would be tied so intrinsically to her history. Of course, I could be totally wrong, and they could just go with the whole convergence thing like they seem to be setting up, which would potentially set the stage for an adaptation of a pretty famous comic storyline. Anytime that anyone brings up the idea of a convergence, a cataclysmic combination of different universes, Secret Wars ultimately comes up. So let's talk about Secret Wars, specifically the 2015 one, since that's the one that Doctor Strange actually played a relatively prominent role in. In that storyline, the mainline comic continuity and the Ultimate Universe were smashed together, becoming a twisted reality known as Battle World. Ruled over by God Emperor Victor Von Doom, Strange wound up serving as his right hand, his sheriff of sorts. Eventually, a combined force made up of characters from both universes, led by 2 different versions of Reed Richards, stood up against Doom, and Richards managed to defeat it, while restoring the multiverse back to the way it was before. Now, an MCU adaptation of the story probably wouldn't take place in Doctor Strange 3, as while Strange does play a big part in the story, he's not really what I would argue is the main character of it. In fact, spoiler alert for Secret Wars, he dies in it. So, probably not going to be a Strange movie. But I could see it as a big team-up, an Avengers sort of film kind of deal. But it could still serve as the next place that we see Strange. Benedict Cumberbatch in interviews hinted at the idea of maybe taking a bit of a break from playing Strange for a little while, though he was adamant that he would return in the future. And I can't really blame the guy for wanting to take a break. All of his appearances within the MCU, with the exception of his cameo in Ragnarok, have been of major significance. So he's probably a bit tuckered out at this point. So maybe Strange will go missing after leaving with Clea, and then during Phase 5, or whenever they get around to adapting the storyline, we'll find them on Battle World, having been stranded there during their attempt to stop another convergence. Now, this is admittedly purely speculation. There's basically no grounding in anything that I could use as proof to say that this is what they're gonna do, but hey, what's wrong with a little bit of speculating every once in a while? Of course, Secret Wars wouldn't really work if we didn't first get some major setup via the Fantastic Four movie that we are getting at the end of this current phase. And that, in of itself, could give us another place where Strange, or at least a hint at Strange, could pop up, as Marvel's first family is now somewhat tied to Doctor Strange within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, given the fact that the first member of that family made their debut in one of his movies. Well, okay, if you really want to split hairs here, technically the first member of the Richards family actually debuted during the final episode of Loki, since Kang is the distant descendant of Reed Richards. But you get what I mean here. When I'm talking about the family here, I'm not talking about the physical Richards family. I'm talking about the Fantastic Four as a team. Now, I can't imagine that Strange would, if he appears in their solo film at all, play any kind of a major role in the main plot of the movie. It just wouldn't make the most sense in the world to have such a magic-focused character hanging around in a movie that will presumably have more to do with science fiction than anything else, considering the nature of the team's origins. And yes, I know that Dr. Doom, who will presumably be the main baddie of the movie, is a magic user, so there will be a little bit of it in there anyways. But you get what I mean here. Also, Marvel doesn't really like having outside heroes playing a big role in debut movies. Off the top of my head, only Spider-Man Homecoming did this, but even then, Iron Man wasn't super essential to the general story of that film, only really providing character development stuff for Peter Parker. So if that's the case, why would I even say that Strange could pop up in their movie in some way, other than the fact that Richards had a little cameo in Doctor Strange's previous film. A cameo, by the way, that ended in probably the most disturbing popping sound that's ever existed in the history of sound design. Seriously, that popping sound is currently living rent-free in my head. Well, picture this for a second. During the end credits scene, Reed and Sue and whoever else are hanging out, enjoying themselves after a major battle with Dr. Doom or Namor the Submariner or whoever winds up being the antagonist of the movie. And suddenly, a portal to the multiverse tears open within their apartment in the Baxter building, out of which pops a rather distraught and beat-up looking Clea. As the team try to come to grips with what is happening in front of them, Clea locks eyes with Reed, telling him that Strange is in trouble and he told her to find the smartest man in the world. This would be a great way to not only set up Secret Wars, laying the groundwork for some massive multiversal threat that only a Reed Richards or two could solve, but also be a nice throwback to the way in which MCU Strange was introduced to Richards from Earth 838, where Mordo referred to him as the smartest man. I guess it would kind of be the inverse of that scene, with Reed being pseudo-introduced to Strange by being called that by somebody else. Interesting little dynamic there. Based on the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, Cumberbatch seems to be interested in taking a bit of a hiatus from the MCU, this could give him quite a break, as the Fantastic Four film is currently slated to be one of the final movies of Phase 4. With only Blade coming after, if I'm not mistaken. Which I might very well be by the time you watch this video, since Disney's release schedule seems to change just about every other day. So by the time this is posted, I might be totally and completely wrong. That's show business for you. Either way, I think it would be a cool little way to show us that Strange and Reed will meet again. And when they do, I sure hope that Strange has a bit of a chat with him about how much of a jerk the Illuminati were to him on that alternate Earth. Or maybe he'll have thought that the idea of the Illuminati was a great idea and he'll team up with Reed to start the mainline MCU version of them, hoping to learn from the mistakes of that other world, which was basically just don't mess with Wanda Maximoff. But I mean, I guess it's not really that hard to do anymore. Or is it? Now I suppose I should probably address the elephant in the room, or rather the eye on the forehead, I guess. Multiverse of Madness left Strange in an odd state, seemingly somewhat corrupted by dark magic due to him having used the Darkhold to dreamwalk into his dead variant during the climax of the movie. That is definitely something that future Doctor Strange stories are gonna have to deal with. The first idea for what could be done with this is probably the most simplistic. If the sequel does indeed have Strange running around with Clea, trying to save the multiverse, we could see her helping him learn how to control his dark corruption, allowing him to turn a curse into a benefit. Would be a bit of an inverse from the comics, where Strange trained Clea in the mystic arts when she was living on Earth, as her powers became drained the longer she stayed away from the dark dimension. So that'd be an interesting way to take that classic relationship dynamic and completely upend it, while also dealing with something that the character is going through. Of course, there are less than simple ways that this storyline could go as well. One fan theory that I've seen floating around posits that the third eye isn't actually Strange's. The idea here is that it is actually controlled by Chthon, one of the many angled ones and the creator of the Darkhold. In the comics, Chthon was said to be able to use the Evil Book to, in a sense, communicate with worlds outside of his own, and could even directly manipulate anyone who reads from it. That's why so many of us assumed that Wanda Maximoff in Multiverse of Madness was gonna be under the control of some other extraplanar being, instead of just being revealed to be straight up a bad guy. Yeah, you can really see how that worked out for us. Despite the fact that we were wrong in that instance, that doesn't mean that Disney and Marvel couldn't still use this general idea for a future plotline. Imagine if they find out that Chthon has been watching Strange for a while, looking for an opportunity to seize total control of him and use him for Chthon's dark ends. only to be thwarted by Clea, the Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension, as well as maybe a few other Sorcerer Supremes from other planes of existence, since there are actually quite a few of them. Maybe this will be something that we see way down the line. That way characters such as Magic, a mutant, and Sorcerer Supreme of Limbo could also play a part in things. Of course, there are countless other possibilities for where they could go with the whole third eye thing. I've seen a few people suggest that this is a hint at a future appearance of Agamotto, with the whole Eye of Agamotto thing being taken very literally in this case. Either way, this is something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later, if for no other reason than to try to save Marvel a little bit on their CGI budget so that they don't have to be constantly comping a third eye onto Cumberbatch's forehead. Finally, I wanted to take this opportunity to muse a little bit more on the idea of what a future Midnight Suns team-up project could look like. Fans of this channel more than likely know that I've been pretty much talking non-stop about my love for Midnight Suns, and how much I would love to see them brought to the big screen. Or heck, even the little screen. I'd take a Disney Plus show. But after seeing Multiverse of Madness, the idea of how it could happen has to change just a little bit. Remember earlier on when I talked about the idea of having a future Strange movie focus on him setting out to help Clea claim the throne of the Dark Dimension for herself? Well, that right there could be the perfect way to bring on this supernatural super team. What if Strange, when faced with the concept of having to take on such an imposing and powerful being as Dormammu, figures that he's gonna need some additional help in order to achieve victory? He could very easily turn around and start recruiting members who specialize in the supernatural, in the magical side of the MCU, assembling the Midnight Suns. Wong would be an easy get for the roster, obviously. America Chavez could tag along as well, especially now that she has started training in the mystic arts. Multiverse of Madness also gave us the first appearance of Rintra the Minotaur, who could jump in and be an actual character this time around. Blade will have had his solo movie by this point, assumedly, so he could fit, as would Moon Knight. Both of these characters have been members of the team in the comics, so having them in the MCU variant would just feel right. And if Blade is coming along, Dane Whitman, aka the Black Knight, could come along as well, since Blade technically made his MCU debut as a voice speaking to Whitman during the end credits scene in the Eternals. Heck, even the variant Loki from his solo series could tag along, depending of course on what goes on in the second season of his show. Of course, there are other characters who could probably also fit the roster who might be introduced here in a little bit, but those are the first ones that popped into my head while I was writing this script, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Now sure, in the comics the team never actually fought against Dormammu, but considering the fact that we have yet to get any solid hints at the existence of either Mephisto or Lilith within the MCU, Dormammu could serve as a fairly decent replacement baddie. I mean, just look at this guy. That's probably the most demonic looking bad guy that we're probably going to see in the MCU, at least for a little while. Oh, and I want to know what you think. What do you think the future holds for Doctor Strange?